What is biliteracy? In its most simple explanation, biliteracy means being able to read and write proficiently in two languages. That sounds easy, but think of everything we've talked about right now. Think of the number of sounds in English and the number of sounds in Spanish and the letters of English and the letters in Spanish. In order for a child to reach a level where he can read and write in both languages, that means he has navigated those codes. That means that his teachers have worked with him, facilitating those connections so that it's easier for him to decode and get to comprehension. Some other ways that we look at this is recognizing, that when we do assessment, how do we assess biliteracy? We have to assess it with a couple of requirements, I would like to say. The first one is that if we're going to assess biliteracy, first and foremost, we have to recognize for our emergent bilinguals that both languages coexist and interact consistently in our emergent bilinguals' heads. A child may say, my favorito animal. There you go. Or he may say, he went to the sportsplex. Or he may say, my cat is color gray and brown. Or he may say, 1, 2, 3. All of these are examples of what happens when two languages intermingle, interact consistently. And as teachers, we have to facilitate those connections so they're able to crack the codes and know that these features belong to Spanish. These features, although similar, belong to English. This is not a referral for speech therapy. This is not a referral for 504. And this is not called interference. There was a time when we called this language interference, but it's not that anymore. It's biliteracy, where both languages coexist. Number two, in order to assess biliteracy, we have to understand that biliteracy is an integrated system of both languages, with features that are similar, different, or completely new between both languages. 5 written vowels, short and long, silent E. Emergent bilinguals develop the knowledge of how these two languages compare, the similarities, and the differences to make cross-language connections. 3, in order to assess biliteracy, we need to understand that learning to read and write builds on understanding sounds, builds on understanding that letters represent those sounds and how these combine to generate and actualize oral and written communication. These are foundational skills to be developed in phonology, in grammar, in morphology, in vocabulary, and in discourse. But in biliteracy, we do it within two languages as an integrated system. To assess in biliteracy, we also need to assess their writing through both languages, because we're validating their writing development, which is organization, literacy developmental stages. And we're also assessing their development from decoding to encoding within the specific features of each language. Once again, when a child says, my favorito animal, or when a child says, miss for miss, or when a child says, I went to a school, there is a reason for this. And instead of saying he's got interference, we need to say he knows his phonology in his primary language. Now we have to give him the features of the new language. Emergent bilinguals are constantly managing two languages at once and constantly working within different features in the phonological system and reflecting upon language structures and meaning. Their knowledge and skills of sounds, letters, and spelling impact their written language. And before these were called mistakes, it was called interference. And now Kathy Escamilla has contributed a new term to the field, and she calls them approximations. Approximations, because this all depends on the type of support and instruction and program that they are getting in their classrooms, in their schools. 5 of the SLAR and ELAR standards are developed the same way in both languages. However, 2 really require that we understand the linguistic aspect in standards 1 and 6. That is where our linguistic expertise comes in as biliteracy educators, foundational skills and composition. Emergent bilinguals are not two monolinguals in one. And for educators, we must understand this. So as we move into all our training for the science of teaching reading, it is important to know that our emergent bilinguals need those codes, need those practices. And as future teachers, you need that knowledge to be able to support your children so that they can navigate those systems. Our emergent bilinguals also need to understand how the two languages compare, how they're similar, and how they're different. We need to think about biliteracy in a different way now. We need both. We need SLAR and ELAR. We need science of teaching reading and the science of teaching biliteracy. In biliteracy, then, we acknowledge that both languages coexist, and our expertise lies in the science of teaching biliteracy. And I'd like to end with another quote from Grosjean, the same researcher who said, the bilingual is not two monolinguals in one person. He now says, and this is definitely appropriate for the work that we're doing, he says a monolingual perspective of language and literacy development does not suffice for understanding and interpreting bilingualism and biliteracy.